The moment I first saw her in the photograph, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the archive's overzealous air conditioning. There was something profoundly wrong about the woman standing behind the three smiling Blackwood heirs. It wasn't just her unnaturally pale skin or the vacant white eyes that seemed to stare directly at me across the decades. It was the way she existed in the photograph, slightly out of focus while everything else remained crisp, her outline almost vibrating against the reality of the image itself. My name is Claire Morrison, and until 6 weeks ago, I was a respected academic researching the social dynamics of wealthy families during the Great Depression. Now I'm afraid to look in mirrors or turn my back on photographs, and I've covered every reflective surface in my apartment because she's watching. She's always watching, and I'm the only one who can tell her story. You won't believe what happened next. Watch until the end. It began at the Harrington Archives, where I was examining the personal collections of America's wealthiest families. The Blackwood file contained dozens of photographs documenting their lavish lifestyle throughout the economic collapse that ruined so many others. The particular photograph that caught my attention was dated June 17th, 1937, a celebration of the twin brothers' 21st birthday. Edward and Richard Blackwood stood on either side of their younger sister Catherine, all three smiling broadly at the camera. They were the very picture of privilege, immaculately dressed, perfectly groomed, radiating the confident assurance of those born into vast wealth. But it was the fourth figure that drew my attention, a maid or governess standing several feet behind them near the doorway. Unlike the Blackwood heirs, she wasn't smiling. Her face was unnaturally pale, her eyes completely white, without visible pupils or irises. Her uniform seemed outdated even for 1937, more Victorian than modern. And there was something about her posture, too straight, too still, as if she were a mannequin rather than a living person. "Interesting choice of focus," remarked Dr. Hamilton, the head archivist, peering over my shoulder. The Blackwood twins caused quite a scandal in the 1940s. Their sister Catherine was the only one who managed to preserve the family fortune. "Who's the woman in the background?" I asked, pointing to the strange figure. Dr. Hamilton squinted at the photograph. "What woman? Oh, you mean that blur by the doorway? Just a smudge on the negative, I expect. Or perhaps someone walked past during the exposure." But it wasn't a blur or a smudge. It was clearly a woman in a maid's uniform, standing with unnatural stillness behind the Blackwood heirs. "Do you have any employment records for the Blackwood household?" I asked. "Staff listings, payroll documents?" "Certainly." The Blackwoods documented everything meticulously. Dr. Hamilton retrieved a leather-bound ledger from a nearby shelf. "This contains all household accounts from 1930 to 1940, including staff salaries." I spent the rest of the afternoon poring over the ledger, noting every servant employed by the Blackwood family in 1937. There were chauffeurs, gardeners, cooks, and housemaids, but no governess or lady's maid matching the woman in the photograph. According to the records, the only female staff in June 1937 were 2 elderly housemaids and a middle-aged cook. When I returned to the photograph, I noticed something I'd missed before. While the 3 Blackwood heirs cast shadows against the wall behind them, the pale woman cast no shadow at all. Before leaving the archives, I requested permission to photograph the image for my research. Dr. Hamilton seemed surprised by my interest, but allowed me to take a digital copy. That night, examining the photograph on my laptop, I noticed another disturbing detail. There was a large mirror visible on the wall behind the subjects, reflecting the photographer and his camera. But in the mirror's reflection, the space where the pale woman stood was empty. She was in the photograph, but not in its reflection. My academic curiosity thoroughly piqued. I expanded my research beyond the Harrington archives. The Blackwood family had been prominent in New England society for generations. their fortune built on shipping and later diversified into manufacturing and banking. Despite the economic devastation of the 1930s, they had remained wealthy, though rumors of unethical business practices and occult interests had always swirled around them. At the National Archives, I found more photographs of the Blackwood family from various social events in the 1930s. The three heirs appeared in many images, always immaculately dressed, always smiling those perfect smiles. But the pale woman appeared in none of them, until I looked more closely. In the corner of a photograph taken at the Blackwood Midsummer Ball of 1936, I noticed a blurry white shape just inside a doorway. Enhancing the image on my computer revealed a partial figure, the same woman, watching from the shadows, only her face and part of her shoulder visible. In another photograph, taken at Richard Blackwood's graduation from Harvard in 1938, I found her again, standing beneath a tree in the distant background, barely visible except for her distinctive white eyes and pale face. She was appearing in photographs where she had no logical reason to be present, always watching the Blackwood heirs from a distance. Have you ever experienced something similar? Let us know in the comments. My research took an unsettling turn when I discovered a series of diary entries written by Catherine Blackwood in 1935 when she was just 16 years old. The diary had been donated to a small historical society by a former Blackwood gardener who claimed to have found it while clearing out the old estate. May 3rd, 1935. Miss Gray watched me again today while I was practicing piano. I never hear her enter the room. She's simply there, standing in the corner. When I look up from the keys, Mother says we've never employed anyone named Gray, but I know what I see. Edward and Richard see her too, though they pretend not to be frightened. May 10, 1935. Miss Gray appeared in my bedroom mirror tonight, though she wasn't standing behind me. Her lips move when she thinks I'm not watching, but I cannot hear what she says. When I told Father about her, he grew very pale and locked himself in his study for hours. May 17th, 1935. Found an old photograph in Father's study. A woman who looks exactly like Miss Gray, standing beside my grandfather as a young man. The inscription on the back reads, Evelyn Gray, governess, 1887-1889. When I showed it to Father, he burned it in the fireplace and forbade me from speaking her name again. These entries chilled me to the bone. If Evelyn Gray had been a governess in the 1880s, she would have been elderly or deceased by the 1930s. Not the same youthful-looking woman appearing in the background of photographs 50 years later. I needed to know more about Evelyn Gray. My search led me to the employment records of the original Blackwood household, stored in the basement archives of the New England Historical Society. The yellowed pages confirmed that an Evelyn Gray had indeed served as governess to the Blackwood children from 1887 to 1889. Her employment had been terminated abruptly, with no reason stated. An obituary notice from a local newspaper provided the next piece of the puzzle. December 12, 1889, Miss Evelyn Gray, formerly employed by the Blackwood family, was reported missing from her lodgings on Cedar Street. Her landlady notes that Miss Gray had been behaving strangely in recent weeks, speaking of a method to transcend the physical form and existing beyond the constraints of mortality. Authorities have found no trace of the missing woman. As I was leaving the Historical Society, the elderly librarian who had assisted me hesitated, then handed me a small envelope. "I shouldn't show you this," she whispered, "but you seem determined to learn the truth." This was donated anonymously after the Blackwood estate was sold in the 1980s. We've kept it private due to its unusual nature. Inside the envelope was a brittle, faded piece of paper covered in handwritten text. The heading read, "The Photographic Imprinting Ritual, followed by detailed instructions for a procedure that the author claimed would allow a person to embed their essence within the silver emulsion, ensuring presence in all future captured images of the specified subjects. The ritual described was a disturbing blend of early photographic techniques and what appeared to be occult practices. It required the creation of a special solution using silver nitrate, developing chemicals, and, most disturbingly, a small amount of the practitioner's blood mixed with dust collected from a cemetery at midnight. At the bottom of the page was a signature, Evelyn Gray. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept returning to the white-eyed woman in the photograph, watching the Blackwood heirs across decades of time. Had Evelyn Gray somehow performed this ritual, binding herself to the family through some impossible photographic magic? It seemed academically irresponsible to even consider such an explanation. And yet, the evidence was mounting that something truly inexplicable had occurred. When I finally drifted off near dawn, I dreamed of a Victorian-era darkroom, red light casting eerie shadows as a woman whispered over a tray of developing chemicals. In the dream, I stood in the corner, watching as Evelyn Gray performed her ritual, slicing her palm and allowing drops of blood to fall into the solution. When she looked up, her eyes were completely white, and she smiled directly at me, not at the dreaming me, but at the real me, as if she could see through the dream into my bedroom. "I've been waiting for someone to notice me," she said, her voice like dry paper rustling. "Now you'll help me finish what I started." I awoke with a jolt to find my laptop open on my bedside table, displaying the Blackwood photograph I'd copied from the archives. I was certain I'd shut down my computer before going to bed. As I stared at the screen in confusion, the image changed subtly. The pale woman in the background turned her head slightly, looking directly into the camera, directly at me, and she smiled. I slammed my laptop shut and backed away from the bed, my heart pounding. Rational thought warred with what I had just witnessed. Photographs don't change. People in photographs don't move. And yet I had seen it happen with my own eyes. Sleep was impossible after that. I spent the remainder of the night with all the lights on, researching everything I could find about Evelyn Gray and the Blackwood family. As dawn broke, my academic skepticism had given way to a disturbing theory. Somehow, through means I couldn't yet comprehend, Evelyn Gray had achieved what her ritual promised, a form of immortality through photographic imprinting. And now she had noticed me noticing her. The next morning, bleary-eyed from lack of sleep, I returned to the Harrington archives. Dr. Hamilton was surprised to see me again so soon. "More research on the Blackwoods?" he asked, eyebrows raised. "Yes," I replied, trying to sound casual. I'm particularly interested in any information about their household staff in the late 1880s. His expression changed subtly. "Curious area of focus. Any particular reason?" "Just following an interesting thread," I said, unwilling to share my increasingly bizarre findings. Dr. Hamilton studied me for a moment before nodding. "There's a collection we don't typically make available to researchers. Personal correspondence of the Blackwood family, considered too sensitive for general access. But given your academic credentials," he hesitated. "And you follow me?" He led me to a small room at the back of the archives, unlocking it with a key from the heavy ring at his belt. Inside were several acid-free boxes stacked on metal shelving. These contain letters, private journals, and personal effects of the Blackwood family spanning from 1850 to 1950, he explained. "And I'll need you to wear these." He handed me a pair of white cotton gloves. "And nothing leaves this room. No photographs, no copies." Once alone with the boxes, I began a methodical search for any mention of Evelyn Gray. The first significant find came in a journal belonging to Arthur Blackwood, the family patriarch in the 1880s. September 3rd, 1887, employed Miss Evelyn Gray as governess for the children. Excellent references from the Whitemore family, though they were strangely eager to facilitate her departure. Miss Gray has an unusual interest in my photographic equipment, particularly the developing process. She has requested permission to use the darkroom, which I have granted. Her knowledge of chemistry is surprisingly extensive for a governess. November 15th, 1887. Discovered Miss Gray in the darkroom well after midnight. She claimed to be developing photographs of the children as a surprise gift, yet her experiments appear more complex. The chemical solutions she prepares have an unusual silver sheen and emit a faint luminescence. When questioned, she spoke of capturing more than mere appearance in her photographs. Must monitor this situation more closely. February 21st, 1888. Most disturbing development. Returned from Boston to find the children speaking of Miss Gray's lessons in permanence. George, Arthur's youngest son, showed me a photograph of himself in which Miss Gray appears, though Elizabeth, Arthur's wife, insists the governess was in town with her during the sitting. More alarming still, Miss Gray appears in the image with her hand upon George's shoulder, yet he claims not to have felt her touch when the photograph was taken. You won't believe what happened next. Watch until the end. I continued reading Arthur Blackwood's increasingly concerned entries about his children's governess. He described how she began appearing in family photographs when she hadn't been present for the sitting, how mirrors would sometimes reflect her presence when she wasn't in the room, and how the children reported seeing her in two places simultaneously. The final entry regarding Evelyn Gray was the most chilling. November 30th, 1889. I can no longer ignore the evidence before me. Miss Gray is practicing some form of unnatural art through her photographic experiments. Today I found Maxwell, Arthur's eldest son, in a trance-like state in the darkroom, while Miss Gray exposed a photographic plate of him to the red light. When confronted, she spoke of ensuring her presence across time and binding her essence to our bloodline. I have dismissed her immediately and forbidden her from contacting any member of this household. The children are distraught, particularly Maxwell, who speaks of Miss Gray whispering to him that she will never truly leave. I have collected and locked away all photographs in which she appears. Tomorrow I shall consult with Professor Harmond at Miskatonic University about methods to counter whatever dark process she has initiated. This was the last mention of Evelyn Gray in Arthur Blackwood's journal. The next entry, dated nearly 2 weeks later, simply stated, "The matter has been resolved. I shall not speak of it again." But had it truly been resolved? The photograph of the 3 Blackwood heirs in 1937, nearly 50 years later, suggested otherwise. Evelyn Gray had indeed found a way to maintain her presence, watching over subsequent generations of the family from within the silver emulsion of photographs. As I carefully replaced Arthur's journal in its box, something slipped from between the pages. A small yellowed envelope that had been hidden in the binding. Inside was a daguerreotype, one of the earliest forms of photography, showing a formal portrait of the Blackwood family circa 1888. Arthur and Elizabeth Blackwood sat stiffly in ornate chairs, their 4 children arranged around them. Standing behind them, with one hand resting possessively on young Maxwell Blackwood's shoulder, was Evelyn Gray. Her appearance sent a shock through me. Unlike the blurry figure in the 1937 photograph, here she was in perfect focus. A striking woman in her late 20s with sharp features and an intense gaze. Her eyes in this image were not the vacant white orbs I had seen before, but there was something unsettling about them nonetheless. A hunger, a calculation that seemed at odds with her position as a family governess. I turned the daguerreotype over. Written on the back in faded ink was a single sentence: She was never there when this was taken. My hands trembled as I slipped the daguerreotype back into its envelope. I needed to understand the connection between Maxwell Blackwood and the three heirs in the 1937 photograph. Returning to the boxes of family papers, I constructed a family tree. Maxwell Blackwood had grown up to become a prominent banker and married into the wealthy Astor family. He had one son, Charles Blackwood, who in turn had three children, the twins Edward and Richard, and their younger sister Catherine, the three smiling heirs in the photograph. Evelyn Gray had maintained her photographic presence through three generations of the family, always watching, always present in the background of their lives. Have you ever experienced something similar? Let us know in the comments. As I was replacing the boxes on their shelves, I noticed a small leather case that had fallen behind one of the stacks. It contained a set of glass plate negatives, carefully wrapped in acid-free paper. With growing apprehension, I held one up to the light. It was a negative of the Blackwood family, not the formal portrait I had seen, but a casual scene in what appeared to be their garden. The family members were captured in natural poses, laughing and talking, and there, moving between them, her figure a blur of motion while everyone else was perfectly still, was Evelyn Gray. The negative beside it showed the same scene from a slightly different angle, taken perhaps seconds later. In this one, Evelyn Gray stood completely still, staring directly at the camera while the family members were now slightly blurred. It was as if she existed in opposition to them. When they were still, she moved. When they moved, she was still. The final negative in the set showed only Evelyn Gray, standing alone in the garden. The Blackwood family had vanished entirely from the image, though their shadows remained on the ground, cast by bodies no longer present in the frame. I returned everything to its proper place and left the archive room, my mind reeling. Dr. Hamilton locked the door behind us, studying me with an odd expression. "Did you find what you were looking for?" he asked. "Yes and no," I admitted. "The Blackwoods seem to have had a complicated relationship with one of their governesses." "Ah, you must mean Miss Gray," he said, surprising me. "Yes, she's something of a footnote in the family history. Rumored to have been involved in the early spiritualist photography movement. Some even claim she found a way to imprint herself onto the family lineage through photographic means." He chuckled. "Academic superstition, of course." "Of course," I echoed weakly. "Just superstition." When I returned home that evening, I found something that made my blood run cold. On my kitchen table was a photograph I didn't recognize, a picture of me, asleep in my bed the night before. I lived alone. I had not set up any camera. There was no logical explanation for its existence. And there, standing in the shadowy corner of my bedroom, was a familiar figure with white eyes and a Victorian governess uniform. I snatched up the photograph, intending to tear it to pieces, but stopped when I noticed something disturbing. In the image, Evelyn Gray's hand rested on my shoulder as I slept. I hadn't felt anything during the night, just as Arthur Blackwood had noted about his son George in 1888. The photographic imprinting ritual was apparently only the beginning. Whatever Evelyn Gray had done, it allowed her not just to appear in photographs of the Blackwood family, but to physically interact with them in some limited way, unfelt by the living. With shaking hands, I took out my phone and photographed my empty living room. When I checked the image, I wasn't surprised to find Evelyn Gray standing beside my sofa, closer to the camera than before, her white eyes fixed on me with unmistakable purpose. I deleted the photo immediately, but the damage was done. By photographing her, I had acknowledged her presence, perhaps even strengthened it. I was playing into whatever process she had set in motion over a century ago. That night, I covered every reflective surface in my apartment, mirrors, windows, even the glossy screen of my television. I placed my laptop and phone in a drawer, unwilling to risk seeing her image again. Despite these precautions, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I woke sometime after midnight to the sound of soft footsteps in my hallway. The hardwood floor creaked as if under someone's weight, the sound moving steadily toward my bedroom door. I lay frozen in bed, watching the doorknob slowly turn. The door swung open to reveal an empty hallway, yet the footsteps continued, now inside my room, approaching my bed. I felt the mattress depressed slightly as if someone had sat down beside me, though I could see nothing. "I know you're there, Evelyn," I whispered, surprised by my own courage. The temperature in the room plummeted. My breath clouded in the suddenly frigid air. On my bedside table, a pen rolled across the surface, seemingly of its own accord, then began to scratch against a notepad I'd left there. I watched, paralyzed, as invisible hands wrote a message in elegant, old-fashioned script. "You see me? After so long, you truly see me. Now you must help me complete what I began." "What do you want?" I asked, my voice barely audible. The pen moved again. "To exist beyond the frame, to step fully into your world. The Blackwood line is ending. Catherine's granddaughter is the last. I need a new anchor." With sudden clarity, I understood what was happening. Whatever process Evelyn Gray had initiated with the Blackwood family was incomplete. She had bound herself to their bloodline through photographs, existing as a kind of photographic ghost. But her goal had been something more, perhaps true resurrection or corporeal manifestation, and now she wanted me to help her achieve it. "Why would I help you?" I asked the empty air. The temperature dropped further, frost forming on my windows. The pen scratched rapidly across the paper. "Because I am already with you. Because I have been watching you since you first saw me in that photograph. Because I can remain with you always, seen or unseen, whether you help me or not. And because you are curious, the academic in you wants to understand what I achieved." She was right about that last part, at least. Despite my fear, the researcher in me was fascinated by the impossible thing Evelyn Gray had accomplished. A form of immortality through photographic means, a way to project herself across decades of time. "What exactly do you need me to do?" I asked. The pen hovered above the paper for a long moment before writing, "Find the original plates, bring them to where my physical form last stood, complete the ritual I began." And where is that? The Blackwood estate. The darkroom still exists, hidden beneath the east wing. Catherine's granddaughter knows nothing of its existence. I thought of the Blackwood estate, now a historical landmark open for tours. Could there really be a hidden darkroom that had remained undiscovered all these years? Before I could ask more questions, the pen dropped to the table. The pressure on my mattress released as the invisible presence moved away. The room gradually warmed again, frost melting from my windows. But I knew Evelyn Gray was not truly gone. She was watching, waiting, from that liminal space she had created for herself, not quite in our world, but no longer confined to the afterlife. A photographic ghost with unfinished business. The next morning, I found more evidence of her growing influence. Every photograph in my apartment, family pictures, travel snapshots, professional portraits, now showed Evelyn Gray somewhere in the background. In the oldest images, she was barely visible, a smudge of white in a corner. In more recent photographs, she appeared more clearly, always watching, always closer to the main subjects. And in the most recent pictures, taken just last year, she stood directly behind me, her white eyes fixed on the camera, her hand hovering just above my shoulder. She had been watching me my entire life, waiting for me to notice her. My academic career had been built on empirical research and historical facts. Now I found myself planning a visit to the Blackwood estate to search for a hidden darkroom on the instructions of a photographic entity that, by all rational standards, couldn't possibly exist. Yet the evidence before my eyes was undeniable. Evelyn Gray, had achieved something that defied conventional understanding, and I was now irrevocably entangled in her century-old scheme. I spent the next day researching the current status of the Blackwood property. After Catherine Blackwood's death in 1972, the estate had passed to her only daughter, Victoria, who had in turn left it to her daughter, Elizabeth Blackwood Hayes, the last living descendant of the family line. Elizabeth had turned the sprawling mansion into a historical museum that opened to the public on weekends, while she maintained private living quarters in the West Wing. Using my academic credentials, I emailed the estate's curator, requesting access for research purposes, explaining that I was studying the photographic documentation of wealthy families during the Depression era. The response came within hours. I was welcome to visit the estate that weekend, and Ms. Blackwood Hayes herself would be available to answer questions about her family's history. As I prepared for the trip, I couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. Reflective surfaces now terrified me. I avoided looking at mirrors, windows, or even the polished metal of my refrigerator door. When I accidentally glimpsed my bathroom mirror while washing my hands, I saw not just my reflection, but Evelyn Gray standing directly behind me, her white eyes fixed on mine, her lips curved in a knowing smile. I turned, heart pounding, but my bathroom was empty. That night, I awoke to find my bedside lamp switched on, though I distinctly remembered turning it off. On the wall opposite my bed, where there had previously been a framed print of Monet's water lilies, now hung a portrait of Evelyn Gray. Not a photograph, but an oil painting that had certainly not been there when I'd gone to sleep. In the portrait, she wore the same governess uniform, but her eyes were normal, dark and intense, not the vacant white orbs I'd seen in photographs. She sat in what appeared to be a photographer's studio, surrounded by cameras and developing equipment. On her lap lay a large leather-bound book, its cover embossed with strange symbols. I approached the portrait cautiously. The brushwork was intricate, the style reminiscent of late Victorian portraiture. As I studied it, I noticed that the book in Evelyn's lap was depicted in extraordinary detail, including the title on its spine: Persistence Beyond Mortality, Photographic Transcendence. A book that, based on my research into Victorian occult photography, had never existed. The most disturbing aspect of the painting, however, was the background. Behind Evelyn's figure, barely visible in the shadowy recesses of the painted studio, were faces, dozens of them, ghostly and indistinct, as if trapped behind a veil. With a shock, I recognized some of them: Arthur Blackwood, his wife Elizabeth, their children. And there, near the edge of the canvas, was a face that hadn't been formed yet, the features still blurry and incomplete. It was my face. You won't believe what happened next. Watch until the end. I backed away from the portrait, my breath coming in short gasps. As I did, the painted eyes of Evelyn Gray seemed to track my movement, though the rest of the image remained static. I fled the bedroom, spending the remainder of the night huddled on my living room sofa with all the lights on. By morning, the portrait had vanished. The Monet print hung in its place, as if nothing had happened. But when I checked my phone, I found dozens of new photographs in my gallery, images I had never taken. They showed every room of my apartment from various angles, all empty except for the unmistakable figure of Evelyn Gray standing in different positions, examining my possessions, looking through my research notes, or simply staring at the camera. In the final image, time-stamped 4:17 a.m., she stood over the sofa where I had fallen asleep, her face inches from the camera lens, her white eyes filling the frame, her mouth open in what might have been a smile or a silent scream. I deleted the photos with trembling fingers, though I knew it was a futile gesture. Evelyn Gray was no longer confined to the photographs I chose to take or keep. She was manifesting independently, growing stronger with each passing day. 2 days later, I arrived at the Blackwood estate, a sprawling Victorian mansion set on 50 acres of immaculately maintained grounds. Elizabeth Blackwood Hayes, an elegant woman in her 60s, greeted me personally in the grand foyer. "Dr. Morrison, welcome to Blackwood Manor," she said, extending her hand. "Your research focus is quite fascinating. My family has always been meticulous about documentation, particularly photographic." As we shook hands, I noticed something odd, a slight flicker in her appearance, as if for a split second, someone else stood in her place. The sensation was so brief I might have imagined it, but it left me unsettled. "Thank you for accommodating my visit," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm particularly interested in photographs from the 1930s, during your grandmother Catherine's youth." Elizabeth smiled. "We have an extensive collection in the family archive room. I'd be happy to show you." As she led me through the mansion, I studied her carefully. Did she know about Evelyn Gray? Was she aware of the photographic entity that had haunted her family for generations? Her demeanor revealed nothing unusual. She was simply a wealthy woman proud of her family's heritage. The archive room was located in the East Wing, a large, wood-paneled space lined with glass-fronted cabinets containing photo albums, journals, and family memorabilia. Elizabeth unlocked one of the cabinets and removed a leather-bound album. These are from the late 1930s, including several from my grandmother's debutante ball and my great-uncle's 21st birthday celebration, she explained, placing the album on a reading table. I opened it with apprehension, half expecting to see Evelyn Gray staring back at me from every page. But the photographs appeared normal. Formal family portraits, casual snapshots of the three Blackwood heirs at various social functions, images of the estate as it had been nearly a century ago. Then I turned to the final page and found what I'd been looking for, the original print of the photograph I'd first seen in the Harrington archives. The three Blackwood heirs smiling at the camera, and behind them, the pale figure of Evelyn Gray with her white, pupilless eyes. "This is a remarkable image," I said, trying to sound casual. "Who is the woman in the background?" Elizabeth glanced at the photograph, her expression unchanged. "What woman? There's no one there but my grandmother and great-uncles." I looked at her in surprise, then back at the photograph. Evelyn Gray was unmistakably present in the image, just as I'd seen her in the archive copy. "Right here," I insisted, pointing to the figure. Behind them, near the doorway, a woman in what looks like a governess uniform. Elizabeth leaned closer, studying the photograph. "I don't see anyone, Dr. Morrison. Just a shadow or a flaw in the development process." Her continued denial confused me. Could she truly not see what was so obvious to me? Or was she lying, maintaining some family secret about their spectral governess? "May I ask," I ventured, "have you ever heard the name Evelyn Gray?" The change in Elizabeth was immediate and dramatic. Her face drained of color, and she took a step back from the table. "Oh, where did you hear that name?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "In my research on your family," I said, choosing my words carefully. "She was apparently a governess employed by your great-great-grandfather Arthur in the 1880s. Elizabeth's hands trembled slightly as she closed the photo album. "Dr. Morrison, I think it's best if we conclude your research for today. I've just remembered a prior engagement." "Ms. Blackwood Hayes, please," I pressed. "I believe Evelyn Gray may be significant to understanding your family's photographic history. If you know something about her, I know only what my grandmother told me," she interrupted, her voice tight. "That the name Evelyn Gray is never to be spoken in this house. That she was a disturbed woman who developed an unhealthy obsession with my ancestors. And that any photograph in which she might appear should be destroyed immediately." Her reaction confirmed what I had suspected. The Blackwood family was well aware of their photographic haunting, had been for generations, but chose to deal with it through denial and suppression. "What if she can't be destroyed?" I asked quietly. What if she's found a way to persist through your family photographs, watching you all through the decades? Elizabeth stared at me, her expression a mixture of fear and resignation. Then you know more than you should, Dr. Morrison, and I strongly advise you to forget what you've learned. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed again. Have you ever experienced something similar? Let us know in the comments. Elizabeth escorted me firmly but politely to the main entrance, making it clear that my research visit was over. But as we passed through the East Wing corridor, I noticed something, a door that didn't quite match the others, its woodwork slightly newer, as if it had been installed decades after the original construction. "What's in there?" I asked, nodding toward it. "Storage," Elizabeth replied too quickly. "Nothing of interest." I knew then that I had found the entrance to the darkroom where Evelyn Gray had performed her ritual. The darkroom that still existed, hidden beneath the East Wing, just as the entity had told me. As I left the estate, I glanced back at the mansion. In one of the upper windows, I saw not Elizabeth Blackwood Hayes, but Evelyn Gray watching me leave, her white eyes unmistakable even at a distance. She raised her hand in what might have been a wave or a beckoning gesture. That night in my hotel room, I found a key on my pillow that hadn't been there when I'd left that morning. It was old, made of tarnished brass, with an intricate pattern on its head that matched the symbols I'd seen on the book in the mysterious portrait of Evelyn Gray. I knew without being told that it would open the door in the East Wing corridor. Sleep was impossible. I paced the hotel room, weighing my options. I could walk away, return to my academic life and try to forget Evelyn Gray and her impossible existence. But even as I considered this, I knew it was too late. She had marked me somehow, connected herself to me just as she had to the Blackwood family. I would never be free of her until I understood what she wanted, what she truly was. Around 2 a.m., my laptop screen lit up of its own accord. A text document opened, and words began appearing as if typed by invisible hands. "You must return tonight. Elizabeth is leaving for Boston in the morning. The house will be empty except for the night watchman, who makes his rounds on the hour. The key fits both the service entrance and the darkroom door. Bring a camera. The silver nitrate plates are still there, preserved in their sealed containers. I have waited long enough." The cursor blinked for a moment, then added, "I will help you navigate the house. I know every corner of it, every creaking floorboard, every hidden passage. I have walked its halls for longer than anyone living remembers." I sat staring at the screen, a chill running through me despite the warm night. Then, making my decision, I began to gather what I would need for a nighttime expedition to Blackwood Manor. Just past midnight, I parked my car a quarter-mile from the estate, hiding it behind a stand of trees. The night was overcast, the moon occasionally breaking through the clouds to cast brief, silvery light over the grounds. I approached from the east, keeping to the shadows, the brass key heavy in my pocket. The service entrance was just where Evelyn had indicated, a small door partially concealed by ivy at the rear of the East Wing. The key slid into the lock and turned with surprising ease, as if the mechanism had been recently oiled. Inside, the service corridor was dark and silent. I switched on my flashlight, keeping the beam directed downward to minimize the risk of being seen from outside. As I moved through the corridor, I sensed rather than saw movement at the edges of my vision. A dark figure keeping pace with me, always just out of direct sight. "I know you're here, Evelyn," I whispered. A cool breeze brushed past my face in acknowledgement, and I felt the lightest touch on my arm, guiding me toward a door at the end of the corridor, the same door I had noticed earlier. The brass key fit this lock as well. Beyond lay a narrow staircase descending into darkness. I followed it down to another door, this one metal with a small window of red glass, the dark room. When I pushed it open, I was struck by the smell. chemicals and dust and something else, something metallic and organic that I couldn't identify. My flashlight revealed a space frozen in time, a Victorian photographer's darkroom with developing trays, chemical bottles, and equipment that hadn't been used in over a century. Yet there was no dust. Everything was immaculately clean and arranged, as if the room had been prepared for my arrival. In the center of the room stood a large format camera on a wooden tripod, aimed at a backdrop of black velvet. Beside it, on a small table, lay several glass plates, a bottle of silver nitrate solution, and a leather-bound book open to a page headed "The Final Transition." I approached the book cautiously, directing my flashlight at the yellowed pages. The text was handwritten in a flowing, elegant script that I recognized from the notes Evelyn had left me. When the vessel has been prepared through prolonged exposure to the imprinted images, when the boundary between observer and observed has sufficiently thinned, the transfer may be completed. The chosen vessel must willingly take the place of the practitioner before the camera, while the practitioner stands behind. Upon exposure, with the correct solution and invocation, the essence will fully transfer, the practitioner gaining corporeal form through the vessel's sacrifice, while the vessel's essence is preserved within the photographic plane. Sacrifice. The word sent a jolt of fear through me. What exactly had Evelyn Gray brought me here to do? The temperature in the darkroom plummeted suddenly, my breath clouding in the frigid air, the red bulb above the developing table switched on by itself, bathing the room in a crimson glow. In that blood-colored light, I saw her fully materialized for the first time, Evelyn Gray, standing beside the camera, as solid and real as any living person. But she wasn't alive, not in any conventional sense. Her skin had the pallor and texture of old paper. Her movements were too fluid, too smooth to be human, and her eyes, no longer white in this manifestation, were completely black, like holes cut into the fabric of reality. "You came," she said, her voice a whisper that seemed to emanate not from her throat, but from the very walls of the dark room. "You understand what must be done. You want to take my place," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite my terror. "You want my body, my life, while I become what? A ghost in photographs." Evelyn's paper-white lips curved into a smile. "Not a ghost, a transcended being, free from the constraints of mortality, from illness and aging and death. I have perfected what the ancient Egyptians could only dream of, true immortality through image and light. But you're not free," I countered. "You're trapped between worlds, neither fully here nor gone. That's why you need me, to complete what you couldn't finish with the Blackwoods." She drifted closer, her form flickering slightly like a candle flame in a draft. I tried with each generation. Maxwell was too afraid, his son Charles too skeptical, the twins too selfish. Catherine came closest. She understood the gift I offered, but her daughter Victoria destroyed the photographs I had cultivated, weakening my connection. "And Elizabeth, the last Blackwood?" "She cannot see me," Evelyn said, a note of frustration in her ethereal voice. "Not clearly. The bloodline has thinned too much. But you—" She reached out, her fingers hovering just above my cheek without quite touching. "You saw me immediately. You recognized me for what I am. Your perception opened the door I've been knocking at for over a century." I glanced at the camera, the prepared plates, the open book of instructions. "And if I refuse to be your vessel? If I walk away?" Her expression hardened, the room growing colder still. "Then I remain with you always, growing stronger each day as I draw energy from your perception of me. I will be in every reflection, every photograph, every shadow at the corner of your eye. I will visit you in dreams and waking moments alike until you can no longer distinguish between the two. And eventually, willing or not, you will complete the transition." I believed her. The manifestations had already begun. The portrait that appeared and disappeared, the photographs taken without my knowledge, the physical sensations of her presence. She was patient. She had waited more than a century for this moment. She could wait longer if necessary. But as I stood in that crimson-lit darkroom, surrounded by the tools of Evelyn Gray's impossible transcendence, I realized something she might not have considered. In her single-minded pursuit of physical resurrection, she had revealed her methods, her weaknesses, her entire process to me. Knowledge, as any academic knows, is power. "I need time," I said carefully, "to prepare myself, to understand exactly what the ritual entails." Evelyn studied me, her paper-white head tilting at an unnatural angle. "Dawn approaches. The watchman will make his final round soon. You must return tomorrow night." "I will," I promised, my mind already racing with half-formed plans, "and I'll bring everything needed to complete the ritual." She seemed satisfied with this, her form beginning to fade as the red light flickered. "Until tomorrow, then, remember, I am always watching, always with you now." As I drove back to my hotel, the eastern sky lightening with the approaching dawn, I knew I had less than 24 hours to find a way to counter Evelyn Gray's photographic immortality, to break the connection she had established with me before it became unbreakable. And I knew exactly where to start looking for answers. The last person who had successfully resisted her, Victoria Blackwood, Catherine's daughter and Elizabeth's mother, had apparently found a way to weaken Evelyn's influence by destroying photographs. But there had to be more to it than that. Something in the Blackwood family records might hold the key. I needed to speak with Elizabeth Blackwood Hayes again to convince her to help me, before Evelyn Gray claimed another victim in her relentless pursuit of corporeal resurrection. I had only hours to find a way to counter Evelyn Gray's photographic immortality. My phone rang, an unknown number. Dr. Morrison. Elizabeth Blackwood Hayes' voice was tense. "Leave town immediately. Forget Evelyn Gray." "I need your help," I replied. "I know about the dark room beneath the East Wing. I know what Evelyn has been trying to do." After a long silence, she said, "Meet me at St. Mark's Cemetery in 1 hour. Come alone." Elizabeth was waiting beside the Blackwood mausoleum. "We don't have much time," she said. She can't manifest strongly on consecrated ground, but her influence still reaches here." Inside the mausoleum, Elizabeth explained, "My mother discovered Evelyn's secret when I was a child. She found the darkroom and Evelyn's journal, but she also had access to Arthur Blackwood's later writings." She ran her hand over a sarcophagus inscribed, "Arthur Blackwood, 1845 to 1911. My great-great-grandfather consulted specialists in occult photography who helped develop a counter-ritual to bind Evelyn to the photographic plane. It confined her to photographs, but didn't banish her entirely. And your mother, how did she weaken Evelyn's connection? By understanding the fundamental nature of her existence." Elizabeth handed me a small leather journal. "This is Arthur's final volume. My mother used his insights to develop her own method. You won't believe what happened next. Watch until the end." "Evelyn bound herself to silver nitrate emulsion during the early days of photography," Elizabeth continued. "My mother realized her power was strongest in original silver nitrate photographs, the medium she used for her ritual. Her influence weakened with each technological advancement in photography. So your mother destroyed the original photographs to weaken her connection," I concluded. "Not just destroyed them, she used a specific process to unbind Evelyn's essence from the silver nitrate, a reversal of the original ritual. And that's what I need to do, unbind her from the original plates." Elizabeth's expression darkened. "It's not that simple anymore. My mother believed she had severed Evelyn's connection completely, but some photographs survived, enough for her to find a new anchor. How do I break her connection to me?" You can turn her own ritual against her, Elizabeth said, showing me a page in Arthur's journal detailing Evelyn's original ritual. And by creating a terminal photograph, a final image that acts as a prison, it requires her original camera, chemical formula, and a specially prepared photographic plate, all of which are in the dark room, I said. Elizabeth nodded, handing me a small velvet pouch. These belong to my mother. The mirror reflects Evelyn's true form. The solution repels photographic entities when applied to your skin. If you succeed, she added, you must dissolve the terminal photograph in the unbinding solution immediately. If you fail... She didn't finish the sentence. Have you ever experienced something similar? Let us know in the comments. That night I returned to Blackwood Manor. The dark room was illuminated by a red bulb, the camera ready on its tripod. Evelyn stood beside it, more substantial than ever, her paper-white skin almost translucent, her black eyes hungry. You've brought everything needed, she said. We must begin before dawn. I set down my backpack, removing Arthur's journal. Evelyn drifted closer, eager to see the documentation of her own creation. Arthur understood more than he admitted, she said. He documented my work perfectly. While she was distracted, I surreptitiously applied the silver nitrate solution to my wrists and temples. I felt a subtle shift, a thinning of her oppressive presence. Let us begin, I said, moving toward the camera. The ritual requires me to stand before the camera while you position yourself behind me, correct? Evelyn nodded, moving behind me. Your physical form must be captured while my essence merges with it. The invocation, I prompted. Teach me the words. She began to recite in an unfamiliar language. As she spoke, I withdrew the silver mirror and suddenly turned, holding it to her face. The mirror reflected not a woman, but a writhing mass of shadow and light, a creature composed of photographic chemicals and fragments of stolen images, hundreds of faces swirling in its amorphous form. She recoiled with an inhuman shriek, her form destabilizing before reforming several feet away. I quickly replaced her prepared plate with my own terminal plate. Not a transcendent being, I said, but a parasite, feeding on others' lives and images. You cannot stop what has already begun, she snarled, fluctuating between human appearance and chaotic swirl. The connection is forged. A connection that can be broken, I countered, positioning myself behind the camera. I removed the lens cap and began reciting the binding incantation. Evelyn's form began to distort, stretching toward the camera as if being physically pulled into the lens. No! She screamed, her voice a cacophony of all she had absorbed. Without me, they remained trapped forever. The fragments of souls she had collected were being drawn into the terminal photograph alongside her. For a moment, I hesitated. Was I condemning these fragments to eternal imprisonment? But the process couldn't be stopped. Evelyn's form unraveled, pulled inexorably toward the camera. As the last of her essence disappeared into the lens, a chorus of wails echoed through the dark room, then silence. I processed the plate according to Elizabeth's instructions. The image showed Evelyn's true form, a writhing mass of photographic elements, faces and fragments swirling around a central void. Then, as the unbinding solution worked, the image dissolved, releasing whatever essences it had captured. I destroyed everything in the darkroom, breaking the camera, smashing the chemical bottles, dismantling the equipment. Then, I left Blackwood Manor for the final time. Se você quer ouvir mais sussurros da escuridão, siga o canal. A próxima história pode estar mais perto do que você imagina. Archivist's note. This manuscript was found on a flash drive belonging to Dr. Claire Morrison after her disappearance in 2018. Despite extensive investigation, no trace of Dr. Morrison has been found. The Blackwood estate was demolished in 2019 following structural damage from unexplained subsidence beneath the east wing. Several photographs recovered from the site show what appears to be a female figure standing in various windows of the mansion, though officials maintain these are merely artifacts of light and shadow. The investigation remains open.